Welcome back, guys. It's Opex. Got a video for you today. I'd like to talk about something rather interesting, something that was on my mind for quite a long time, and it's very good to dive into it in this video. Last video I talked about basically maintaining becoming your greatest version. Before that was becoming your greatest version, so I got those two out of the way. I think it's a very nice blueprint for anybody to do anything in life. It is the blueprint for life to be successful. Also made videos in the past on health over wealth, things of the nature of like greed and selfishness and money and stuff like that. So I think a lot of that has to do with this video as well. I'm going to tie a lot of things into this video. I'm going to drink my coffee, gather my thoughts, and we will try to, as hard as we can, not to make this an hour-long video. So last night I stayed up really late watching the UFC fights till 3 a.m. watching all the press conference because I'm that guy. I love martial arts. Been a martial arts fan for a long time, so I stayed up late last night. Woke up late. Took, I had a nice workout real late. I'm drinking my coffee now, and it is now 1:15 in the afternoon. So this is really late for me to make a video. This is really late for a start for the day. So just understand that I'm trying to gather my thoughts here while I'm drinking my first coffee of the day at 1:15 p.m. Made a video called Domestication and Control. It's one of my favorite videos I've ever created because I tied in a lot of things and I articulated it in a way where, less intelligent people can digest it. And in this video, I want to talk about slavery. And I've talked about it in the past, about how there's such thing as modern slavery. I'm going to really dive into that in this video because I think it's very important to talk about this topic. And I think it's very relevant to show you a different outlook of what you've been looking at life. Okay, let me drink this coffee. Got my protein powder in it because it's post-workout. Yeah, let's dive into it, guys. We're already 2.5 minutes in this video, and again, I don't want to make it a long video. I talked about modern slavery in the past, how it has changed, how we're basically a slave to the system. We're spinning the hamster wheel. In modern slavery, I'm going to reiterate that term now in another way that is probably much easier to digest. This would be, think of it like free-range slavery. Why is this important? Look, once upon a time, all of our chickens were free-range. We didn't have a massive chicken industry 300 years ago. There was no poultry industry like it is today, where just a few main sources and factories and butchers that Tyson Chicken's like a main name for chicken, where they just own the whole market. They have a conglomerate. They just have tons and millions of chickens, and they have a nice factory farm going. And a lot of people say that's not good for your health, for the health of the animal, because they're just choking on each other's feces. They're in very unstable environments. They're not really looked after. They're filled with growth hormones and other type of antibacterial stuff to basically unnaturally, artificially help them survive in that type of environment. So a lot of people try to switch to an alternative called free range. Now, here's the difference here. All right, free range, you don't really see much danger, and it's almost okay. Right? Like, it's almost like, okay, we've domesticated and controlled these animals for thousands of years. Why don't we just keep doing it? They don't really care. They don't realize that they're in this confinement, and they don't know. They have no power, right? They have no idea what's going on. A lot of these, even free-range cows, they won't go over a fence to go to the other side. Even if they have no grass on their side, they will still not, even if they're starving, they will not jump over that fence to the other side. That's how domesticated and controlled they are, and it took thousands of years to domesticate these animals. Now, when you're domesticating animals, and it takes thousands of years, you're going to have it in a free-range environment. You're going to have it in an environment in which that you believe that you're free. Why is that important? If you believe you're free, then no one can convince you otherwise, because you believe you're free, right? It's like if you're told in America, this is the land of the free. No matter how many times you're not allowed to jaywalk or walk off the sidewalk, you still have this idea that you're free to do whatever you want. So if I don't get health insurance, I have to pay a fine. And if I don't pay that fine, I go to jail. And if I choose to not go to jail, I can get killed. Right? That does not sound like freedom because I chose not to pick a healthcare provider. You know, that's not freedom. I mean, anyone with intelligence can tell you right now that you are not free. Freedom is freedom. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's not, yeah, you're free if you pay. You're free if you do this, if you do that. No, because if you were free, you didn't have an option to be free by paying the way. It doesn't work like that in freedom. But it does in slavery. Now, we just said that basically free range. A lot of these free range animals don't know that they're caged. Same goes with humans. This is important, guys. You believe that you're an American, let's say. You live in America, or you live in Germany, it doesn't matter where you live, but in your country, you believe you're in that country, you're part of that country. You're on that team. And so like your sports, you're going to root on your own team for football, soccer, whatever you want to call it. And you're going to root your team, you're going to root your country, whether it's in war or whatever. But a lot of people fail to realize that they're just free-range slaves in that border. You have a fence. You're not allowed to cross that fence without permission. It's pretty much just a huge free-range circus of population of people. We all know when we hear slavery, we think of shackles and chains. We think of slave owners. We think of a direct, it's a slave owner telling a slave, do this, tend my fields, whatever, right? And that's what you think of slavery. That is like these slaughterhouses nowadays, where it's clearly obvious that you're being factored. It's just a huge murdering faction. It's just raising them, getting them plump. They're not very healthy, but it doesn't matter as long as they reach a certain age and they get fat enough. They're worth money. Now, to the trained eye or untrained eye, we can look at that and be like, hey, that's wrong. We would not like that for humans, right? That type of scenario would be terrible for humans. So if that goes outside the eye and it's not a direct contact with the eye, you may not pick that up. So you might go through life hearing things like you're free. Look, you can walk across the street and no one's stopping you. And you think that's freedom. And what you're really in is you're in a huge range in your country that you're allowed to go. There's a bunch of places in that country you're not allowed to go. So that is not freedom, right? So if it's not freedom and we don't have the choice to do what we want on our free will, what is it? Come on, guys. So let me finish this coffee. So it took thousands of years to domesticate humans, let alone animals. Thousands of years. This has been perfected over thousands of years. There are families who are in charge for thousands of years. In the ancient pyramid times of Egypt, the pharaoh, the people in charge, would be in charge for thousands of years. The same people in Korea, the same people in Japan. Why is this? Look, I'm going to explain something to you so you understand it in a certain way. It's going to be easier to digest this way, so get ready for this one. Thousands of years ago, there were many more groups of people. Nowadays, you look at a piece of paper that asks you your ethnicity. White, black, Latino, Asian, whatever, right? East Asian, West Asian. They might even have other things that they would direct into that question, but not too many, right? Like you got like 4 or 5 or 6 choices. Top 6 choices. Thousands of years ago, there were more people. There's much evidence and history written on this. Of course, I would also argue that a lot of your history is false, but when there are people and tribes that have been decimated and destroyed and obliterated, and there are people that existed. Neanderthals existed. There's a lot of evidence for these people existing. There's Aztecs there's people that existed with Aztecs. Now, Mayans, Aztecs, and stuff like that. There's other groups that were here in America. There were other groups that were in Australia. There were other groups that were in Asia that didn't have Asian eyes. These things were well documented for many years. There were many other races and ethnicities of people that didn't make it till modern day. How were they decimated, or rather, why were they decimated? There's this idea that people are part of a group, a tribe, your country, and you're going to give up everything to lay it all on the line for your country because you're part of that group. You become a hero in that country. You all look alike. At least thousands of years ago in the same country, you all looked alike, or at least similar. And the people that didn't look alike would be clearly and obviously in another tribe, and that would be mistaken as or looked at as an enemy. You can see this nowadays where, there's racism and stuff like that. It's modern. Modern racism is just an old thing that carried over for thousands of years of genes, of trying to get your genes to succeed in life. So thousands of years ago, there was many more people, types of people, groups of people, families of people, people that were distinct, ethnicities and groups that were obliterated and wiped out. Why were they obliterated? Because there were so many of these groups that they wanted their group to prevail, and territories would be fought over. One side would win and be like, you know what? Fuck your side. We're gonna just kill everyone, and all the women that are left to be raped and pillaged, and they would be the new genes. And like Aztecs and Mayans, they interbred. They weren't allowed to, but of course they interbred. And there's tons of examples like this, like Japanese and Chinese. They're not allowed to interbreed. Why? There's something that happened thousands of years ago and still happening to this day, where everyone wants their genes to succeed and their tribe and their group and the people that look like them to succeed. I saw this last night in the UFC event. In the UFC event, Kamaru Usman is, he's black. Everyone else who is black is rooting for him. Almost everyone who is white, except for like the liberals, were rooting for Colby. And when you're seeing all the blacks going for the blacks and all the whites going for the whites, it's kind of obvious that this is inherent. This isn't a racist thing. This isn't like, I don't like your group. This is just a genetic thing. It's almost natural. I've talked about this in the past, how natural this is. It's a natural phenomenon, and it's because of thousands of years of raping and pillaging people that didn't look like you and trying to have your genes succeed. Why is that important? So, look at it like this. And like I'm trying to explain to you, it's totally natural. If you're born in Kenya, you're rooting for the Kenyan fighter. If you're born in today's modern day and age and the melting pot nowadays, America, many different European countries, it becomes a melting pot, and it becomes very diverse. And there's many melting pots throughout the country or the world, from the South America to Europe to Americas. A lot of different people. Therefore, in our countries, we're used to this separation and the division, let alone the unification. So we're used to both of that stuff. We're used to, let's all just get along, we're used to the racist shit. We're used to it all. And we're almost numb to it at this point. Like, it's like, yeah, we've seen it before. If you go to another country, they might not like you. I'm a mixed martial arts fan. You see any of these people that are non-Brazilian go to Brazil, what happens? that non-Brazilian gets booed. That non-Brazilian, it gets their ass reamed, whether you're black, white, it doesn't matter. If you're not Brazilian, now Brazilian is not a race, right? But that whole Portuguese, if they look alike, darker skin, but not too dark like black, but not too light like white. If you got those traits, if you were born in Brazil, if you speak Portuguese, they're rooting for you. They don't care what your fighting style is. They don't care if you ever won before. You look like them, they're rooting for you. It's very inherent in our DNA. So when Japan and such got created, these countries got created, well, because they put a ruler in place and they took over other people and they murdered other people and they created bigger and bigger territories. This is more along to do with race, right? This has something to do with your people. And this is totally fine. This is cool, right? Because this is something that happened in every ethnicity in every place in the world. There was territories fought from different races, okay? So I don't want to hear any bullshit like, oh, the white people over Indians. Well, how about the blacks over the Islamic people? I don't know. Right? Like, everyone basically owned another person at a time. The reason why your genetics are here right now is because your race obliterated another. You survived. Right? So whatever race you are, be happy that you had those genetics, because if you didn't, if you were on the other side of the spectrum fighting for that territory, you wouldn't be here today. Anyways, so we're living in a really safe time right now. So this melting pot thing, this fighting wars and new territories and stuff, this is essentially stopped. But there's one more thing that needs to be done: the unification of the New World Order. This happens when one group controls the world. Instead of Japan, the ruler of Japan, the ruler of China, the ruler of India, and everybody else have to get together and basically say, this group's going to rule. They're going to be the hierarchy of the world. So everyone wants to be part of the winning team. So I believe that will inevitably happen. I don't believe in the East versus West thing. I don't believe in Putin versus America or China versus, whatever. All right? I don't believe in that shit. You guys might, because you watch TV where they're convincing you of this shit and they have to repeat it 100 times to get it through people's head because you don't see it, right? So they got to convince you of it. But in your daily life, do you see yourself as a slave? Probably not, right? And I think that a lot of this has to go hand in hand. Why are you a slave? You are in a world where everybody's fighting for ownership over you. I mean, the higher ups are. So this would be, if you're an American, you're not allowed to leave America because you're their slave. Unless you get permission and they are pretty much certain you're coming back. You have family back in the States. You're not leaving because they want your money. They want you. There are a lot of people that they don't want. This would be people that are going to pay less in taxes, or people that are paying or less value to their slave owner. So this would be like the Mexican working under the table that they deport, right? So why are they deporting that person? Well, they're not providing enough value to the slave owners. So they say, well, we don't want them. And Mexico's like, well, we don't want them. So if they're not providing value or resources back into the ownership of them, they're not wanted. They don't care if they die. The cancer industry is so rapid. I mean, cancer industry is basically the new world gas chamber, you know? I mean, essentially, that's what it is. The cancer industry is this. I mean, you put you in chemo and radiation just like you would in that gas chamber. And they murder you and when they have no more use for you, just like in the gas chambers. They murdered you when you weren't working hard enough. It's a labor camp back in the day, and I made a video on that. That history is manufactured, or something like that. I wrote, or history is a lie. History is manufactured, something like that. I made that video where I talk more into detail about that stuff. So thousands of years ago, people would have to fight for their country. Nowadays, the country is, I mean, there's going to be no more wars, and, you know, there's going to be a Japan in 30 years, right? The only way that Japan won't be there, or America, or one of these countries, big countries, aren't going to be there in 30 years, is if they all surrendered under one global state, and they actually tell the people that they've done this. I don't believe that's going to be taking place. I believe they have it perfected right now, where people believe that they fight for their country instead of their slave owners. They fight for, the delusion things, the things that they're taught or told and convinced of. And therefore it becomes belief. And what happens when you believe something? It becomes true in your mind. If you believe something, in your mind it's true. Therefore, the world around you has to operate under what you believe. I know that's a different video for another time. But, right now we're in a point where people fight for their country. People pay taxes for their country. But what you're really doing is you're a free-range slave. You're allowed to go to another state. You're allowed to be in the confines of, where you're allowed to go and operate under this paradigm of going to work, spinning this hamster wheel, making money for, obviously, your slave owners. If you went to work and not paid your slave owners, you go to jail. That's called tax evasion. Now, tax evasion's a federal offense, right? If something's a federal offense, jail isn't even the answer. You're going to be incarcerated for a long time under federal prison, incarcerated for a long time. That's a severe offense. The government does not, government's basically, I've told you guys this before, there's a pyramid here on hierarchy. There are the elites. They control the banks. The banks control the government. The government, and there's a trickle-down effect. The government is basically from the federal level down to the state, down to the county, down to the town, down to the city, down to, just even your block can have a different enforcement laws. Point is being, if you're operating under this notion under you're free, but you got to give up 50% of your money that you earn or else you go to prison, I don't understand how people think they're free. I mean, under that alone, like, I'm trying to convince you guys by having reason and evidence for you, right? This is the one that you shouldn't get past. You need to pay them to breathe. You need to, if you want to earn money, you need to pay them. Okay. Why is that important? Because as I've discussed in my video, Population Control Part 2, they want control of your food. They want you to believe in some sort of American dream. The reason why that's important is because if you believe in that American dream, then you're going to go out and work and live a comfortable life while paying money and not being responsible for the things in your life. You're not going to be responsible because you pay somebody else to be responsible for you, right? It's a very simple paradigm, but it gets you dislocated from that experience of you being responsible, you taking care of something on your own, whether that doesn't matter what that is, but you need money for it. How do you get money? You need to work. If you're working off the books, clearly you can kind of get away with it, but they'll look into it when they start seeing your bank account get up, or if they see major purchases by you. Trust me, they do look into it. I know people that have been looked into for being off the books, having their own business, but they'd never had an LLC. Yeah, they don't want you to make money unless it's for them. Why is that? Because you've never been free, guys. You've never been free. You were born a slave. Once they give you a birth certificate, that is a certificate of birth, just like they do any other product. If you have a product for sale or something that is of monetary value, they put a birth certificate on that product. I know that's very tough for you guys to understand, I'm diving through this really quick for you. If you want me to make a whole video on that, I will. I think I have discussed this enough in the past, but they're deep in my hour-long videos. At some point in those videos, they're little teasers of this. So Your birth certificate is your way of your parents not knowing that, hey, if you want to have a driver's license, if you want to work in the United States, you need to be on the books. And to be on the books, you need to be a slave. And in order to be a slave, you need a birth certificate. That certificate is a legal documentation that is essentially collateral for a debt. Remember I just said that the banks basically control the government? Well, the banks control the government via debt. They lend money to the government at money that they can't get back in return because they add interest. If you are a bank, you own all the money of that bank. All right, you own it. That money is yours. It's not the government's. It's not the United States money. It's the Federal Reserve's money. Where does that Federal Reserve get its money? Well, actually, believe it or not, it was originated overseas by the UK. People from the UK, the Rothschilds and stuff like that. This conglomerate of families, of rich families that run the monetary system of the world, essentially, which is the euro, the dollar, and such. This is from Europe, believe it or not. So Europe runs the United States. Some people would argue that China owns half of the United States, and I would agree. But that's neither here or there for this video. I'm not here to argue any points. Europe owns the United States then. Because if the banks own the government via money, via debt, that you lend the government, which has $0 at this point, you lend that government $1 trillion, but you need $2 trillion repaid to you, that's impossible. Because you only get a million. So that government has to now have a scheme through taxation in order to pay off that debt. That's why you pay 50%. If you earned, 50% after 50% after 50% adds up. So they're actually making their money back. Plus, not only are you paying them taxes on nothing, right? Because you're giving them 50% for nothing. They're not paying taxes on that 50%. They just take 50% of your money. So they're able to survive that $2 trillion debt every time they pull out $1 trillion. So it's a Ponzi scheme of who controls who. This is the truth. Money is the root of all evil. Money is why you are a slave nowadays. Money. If money was not to exist, you could not be a slave in the free-range system. You can't. Money is why you spin that hamster wheel for the Matrix. This Matrix keeps going. This guy truck driving who's dead at a truck stop today. You know there's a guy right now that died today at a truck stop because after 3 days someone knocked on that door, found a fat guy in the back dead. Probably 35 years old, semi-young, doesn't matter. Terrible lifestyle, dead. Why? He was spinning that hamster wheel. He didn't evaluate what was important in his life. He doesn't have this information I am giving you. He's dead. His genetics aren't going to live on because he was fat. He was spinning that hamster wheel. No one gave a fuck about him, especially not his slave owner. He just wanted him to spin the wheel of the Matrix. There's no care for him. They trade you guys like fucking cards. Oh, I got OPEX. Yeah, let's trade him for this. They basically trade you guys like fucking stock. Now, I could explain that in greater detail, but you can find some people online that go in depth about it. I don't believe 100% of what I see online, and I don't encourage you to as well. I don't even encourage you to believe what I'm saying. Try to argue against it, though. Come on, guys. Argue what I'm saying right now. Argue against it. Good luck. So, think of it like this. If you need money to survive, and you're not allowed to just buy a house without taxation, you're going to have property tax the rest of your life, what does that result? That means you need to work the rest of your life. You need to have an income the rest of your life. Or else you're not worth it to them. They want money out of you. They want value out of you. This is how the system operates. And if you believe you're free in this system because of what I just said, you must be out of your mind. You must be really delusional to believe this system is making sure you're free. Look, you can't live a day without money. And that money is for your slave owner. It's not for you. You only get a little piece of the pie that you have earned. As an anarchist, I believe in freedom of being able to own the product of your own labor. If you can't own the product of your labor and it belongs to someone else, you can't be free. That means you are a slave. I mean, honestly, what's your argument that you're not a slave? Because you don't have shackles and chains? You're just a free-range slave. You're not allowed to leave the country. You're not allowed to go to certain territories. You can't go to Area 51. You think you're an American? No, you're just a free-range slave. You're not an American. You're not part of that team. Right? Only specific people can go to the White House, guys. You're not on that team. Donald Trump's son isn't on that team. They take 2-3 weeks for clearance for Donald Trump's son to go to the White House. Guys, if he's not part of the game, you think you are? Where are you guys? When you guys vote, you're just saying that you're an idiot. When you're voting for a system that is just going to repetitively take more from you, require more from you, make sure that you're sick, so then when you're not worth it, they can just take more money from you through the cancer industry, which is much more intelligent to go about murdering people. Because with the cancer industry, you know, you can look at it as, okay, Hitler gassed all these Jews, right? He didn't, but the Nazis did, right? Gassed all these Jews, had to force them. That's hard. And you got to tell everyone who sees this, sees right away that you're murdering these people. You're gassing them, they're dying, you're burning them in an oven afterward, cremating them. It's very hard to hide that, right, guys? But in the cancer industry, you have a doctor that you trust because you're forced to trust this doctor because of health insurance, because you're forced to have health insurance, so you're forced to have a doctor, then you're forced to listen to what the doctor says, right? Does that sound free to you? It's not free. I should be able to choose a MD that doesn't have a doctor's degree. I should be able to choose one, but you don't have that option. What do you mean free? I can go list after list after list, thing after thing after thing. What do you mean you're free? You're an idiot if you believe you're free in this society. I'm free to speak however I want to speak on whatever platform allows me to, but I'm not allowed to freely speak. You know, I'm allowed to freely speak, but it's, how do I explain this? It depends on where. It depends on, you know, if I'm loud. You know, there's infringements on the freedom of speech. If I'm at my house and I'm yelling something, that could be enough for somebody else to say that's a noise ordinance thing. That's an infringement on your freedom of speech there, but I'm 100% on noise ordinance. I'm 100% on that. If you're infringing on somebody else, don't do it. But that's the point that I'm trying to make, is that there is infringement going on, even on something that a lot of people believe that is not going on. Political correctness. They've tried to put you in a bubble of you not having responsibility. You having responsibility for the value that you're giving to your slave owner, sure. But not responsibility in terms of you have all the product of your labor. You choose what happens with all of that money, which you don't. I mean, you have to cough up 50%, and then you have property taxes. And if you don't have property taxes, you're going to have to rent. And if you're not renting, you know, you always need money every single month. That's something that's always going to happen. You need money. You need income every month. You need to pay rent. You need to pay your mortgage. You got to pay these things. You got to pay property taxes every year. So you need an income. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Right? If you're trying to live the American dream, you need an income. That's where they get you. Then you have to run the rat race your entire life, guys. Even if you do retire by 64 or whatever. If you retire by that age, great. But you're sick at this point. You've already ran the hamster wheel for 50 years. You've already done what you had to do for 50 years. And then you get a little piece of the puzzle, a little piece of the pie. Come on, guys. Does that sound like a delusion? You get a little Social Security, a little bit of pension, or something like that? Dude, guys, you'd be lucky to get a pension nowadays. And does that even equate anything to everything that you had to cough up throughout all those years of 50% of your paycheck, 50% of your paycheck, 50% of your paycheck, 50% of your paycheck? Times that by 300 million people in this country. 50% of your paycheck, 50% of your paycheck. These motherfuckers are rich, guys. They control you. Go ahead. Do me a favor. Fish without a license. You're eventually going to get caught. Because they are going to catch you. Grow your own marijuana. Go ahead, guys. Grow it. They hate competition. What else? They hate competition. They find it federally offensive to not pay them, not cough up what you've earned. So they'll throw you in prison. I mean, I can go on and on and on and on and on and on about example after example and kind of mold around you the idea that you are a slave. But there's no shackles and chains. There's slavery of the mind. They've convinced you guys you need to cough up 50% of your paycheck. Whether you're okay with that or not, you're going to do it. Because who's the boogeyman? Who's your slave owner? You don't see your slave owner. They're behind a curtain. Right? Money, the banks. They're not directly asking you for money. They use the government to do it. Then the government uses their factions of law enforcement to do that. It's a trickle-down effect. You don't see who owns you. Therefore, you don't believe you are a slave. But I encourage you, don't give them their money. Notice how I said their money. In the Bible, Jesus was basically saying that give to Caesar what is his. Caesar's face is on that coin. That's his money. Give unto him. Which is essentially, in my opinion, fucking with people's religion. They've translated that in, was it the King James or the one before the King James? It was either the miraculous King James, you know, that huge, great version. It was the best version of the Bible, in my opinion. I think it was that when they started saying that you should pay your taxes. Basically, pay your taxes. He asks you for something, you give it to him because you're his slave. Wow. I thought we're God's slave. And now we're Caesar's slave? So when they changed that translation, because King James wanted more taxes. Woo, how does that fucking play a role, guys? If you start piecing these pieces together and you understand the reasoning why they translated that King James version the way they did, they've turned everyone into a slave. Not only are you a slave to religion, now you're a slave to the state. So, if you're a slave to the state in religion, you're really God. If you believe there's a God up there that requires money to give to church, if you believe that is a thing, money's the root of all evil. It even says it in the Bible. And then you have to give the church the root of all evil? Come on, guys. Put things together. And then you got to give to Caesar what is his? Come on, guys. Taxation is theft. They are stealing your money. They are enslaving you. If I can put this any easier of a way, I would have. But I think this is as easy as I can put it. Easiest way to digest it. Now that you understand that, you can understand that, hey, do you want to continue this? Now that your eyes are open and you are more conscious of this, what are you going to do about it? Let's say I was the only one in the world with this information, right? That would make sense why we don't make a revolution. We don't all go up in arms. But here's the thing. You're so innately convinced you are free. You are so innately convinced that the world is your oyster and you can just do whatever you want and you're convinced of this. Therefore, you won't ever do anything to hurt your slave owner. We have been conditioned to believe that we are doing everything that we can to raise up our life, to better our life, to put priorities in place, to spin this hamster wheel, to better our lives. Because if you are a good slave, you will be rewarded. If you are a good slave, you worked for your company for 40 years, you paid your taxes for 40 years, you haven't been to jail, you haven't been to court, you're a good slave, you're going to be rewarded. You're going to have something called money. And because you have more money, well, you're going to buy a car, you're going to buy a better house, you're going to get more perks. Is that worth it for you in life? To be a good slave so your car looks better or it runs faster? If that's more important to you, possessions and things, then yes, go be a good slave. I hope you have some flashy earrings. I hope it really attracts the opposite sex, because if you don't, if you don't choose to go to this slavery route, I believe there's happiness there. Money is not the root of happiness. Money is the root of evil. And if you want to keep going towards that root of happiness, and it's going to be a never-ending journey, because you're going to have to pay taxes that next year. So if you want to stay up, you got to keep working. And it's for this hamster wheel. It's not necessarily for you or your family. Yes, that is the perk of it. But ultimately, it's for possessions. It's for bigger gain. It's for, first world luxuries. It is not for a third world, a roof over your head, or a clean source of water. That's not why you're doing it. You're not doing it to survive. You're spinning this hamster wheel for your slave owner, because they're taking 50% and you don't have a choice. Does that make sense? You're not spinning this hamster wheel for your loved ones, because that is not much of a perk. You're spinning the hamster wheel because you need to maintain what you have. You're going to lose everything you have once that income dries up. Right? I made a video in tons of update videos on it of my plan to retire in 10 years. I did this for 3 years ago or 4 years ago when I first got into trucking, about 4 years ago. And I laid out a blueprint, the goals in my life, why I want to get out of taxation and the things that would require property taxes and constant income. Because constant income equals stress. Stress equals the number one killer. Stress can greatly depreciate your health. This would be your cardiovascular health. This could be more prone to disease. This could be a lot of different things, right? Your blood pressure is going to fluctuate. Maybe your insulin levels. Look, stress is terrible. And if you have an alarm clock, you're not getting enough sleep, and that stress is going on for year after year, your health is going to diminish. And why is your health diminishing? Because you're spinning the hamster wheel for somebody else, for your slave owner, who already has everything he wants in life. Your slave owner has more boats than he can count, bigger house with more maids and servants than you can count, owns millions of people just in your country, owns them, has a card that says birth certificate. Someone owns you. So that's essentially what I'm trying to say here is this. Understand that you need to find out what's important. I just gave you the blueprint of how to be successful, to maintain success, to operate under your greatest version. And in this video, I talked about, hey, you're a slave. Is this worth it for you to keep spinning this hamster wheel for somebody that essentially you're never going to meet? You don't know what he's doing with that money, but it doesn't matter, because you just know that you have to keep paying it every year. You want this property. Well, not only do you have to pay for the house, not only do you have to pay for the land, you have to pay every single year. For who? For what? Because of a debt. You are collateral for a debt. You are labor. Labor equals money, especially if that money not only produces the labor to spin the hamster wheel, but also produces that money required to continue spinning this hamster wheel under the system. There's a trickle-down effect. Banks require money through debt, via debt, from the government. And that trickles down all the way down to your local government, which trickles down to your landlord, which trickles down to a tenant. This is important, understanding where you are in the system. Unless you are a landlord, you are the lowest level of the totem pole. Landlord being the second lowest. Come on, guys. You are the lowest level of the totem pole if you do not own a house. If you own a house, a property, you are number 2. Because A, you still don't own that property. You are a tenant, technically. Even if you are a landlord, you are still a tenant in the United States of America. Still important to understand that even if you own land, you are a slave. Okay, so this didn't exist 300 years ago in the United States. If you owned land 300 years ago, you were free 300 years ago. Does that make sense? You didn't have a requirement for a debt. You didn't have a birth certificate. You were not a slave in the United States 300 years ago. You were not. Then birth certificate came through. The Federal Reserve, both of these happened in the 1900s, the 20th century. And to mention, obviously, the country became a country, which became a bordered country in 1776. So that's when it started, 250 years ago. That's when it started. 250 years ago, the beginning of slavery in the United States occurred. This has happened in other countries. This is why people left the United States, Europe, to come to America, was to get out of this system of debt, of slavery, of free-range slaves. They knew they were free-range slaves. But guess what? If you came to America, you got a piece of property, they can't find you there. They're not going to come to your country in the 1600s and ask you for money. Yeah, fuck them. You'll shoot them, right? Fuck them. You're going to come all the way over here and fuck with me? And they tried to. That's how 1776 happened. And if you don't believe that you lost the war in 1776, you are a slave. You are delusional. You are convinced through their rhetoric, through their history books, that you won 1776. Nope, that was the marking day 1 of slavery in America. You are free-range slaves. You are not shackles and chains, clearly obvious slaves. Just like the factory farms. It was clearly like the factory farms were like the slavery in America with the blacks and the Irishmen. You had shackles and chains. You had people in the cotton fields. You had people working. That was something that truly did happen. There's a lot of evidence for that. I'm somebody who does not believe 90% of the history books, but that 100% did happen. There's too much evidence to pass up. Way too much. And just like Harriet Tubman trying to free the slaves, you can't, I can't free you guys. The only way you can free yourself is in the mind. And I just consciously enlightened you if you weren't aware of this information. So in my opinion, go look up what a birth certificate is. Look up what a mortgage is. Mortgage is a death tax. That's what it means in French. Mortgage is a death tax. Not only do you have a mortgage, not only do you have a death tax, you have a property tax on top of that. Come on, guys. And if you don't pay both of those, they take your house from you that you paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. Let's say you spent $250,000 on a house. You miss a payment on that mortgage or on that property tax. They take it from you. You're free? Nope, that was always someone else's. That was not yours. On your deed, it calls you a tenant on purpose. It directly infers you to being someone who lives on the property of somebody else. That's what a tenant is. That's why on your deed, it calls you a tenant. You are not an owner of that property. You are a tenant paying dividends on that property, maintaining that property for the liking of your slave owner who actually owns that property. Wonder why you can only do certain things on your property? Because that isn't your property. That's somebody else's property that you're paying for. Congratulations, slave. It's not all doom and gloom. Of course, I did that population control video. Then I did a couple positive videos on becoming your greatest version and how to maintain motivation to become that greatest version. So I'm not all doom and gloom here, guys. I'm positive and negative. You got to talk about both. And I don't want to just stick with one negative mindset because my mindset becomes that. I'm all around. I'm very versatile. If you don't like this information, thumbs it down. If you like this information, thumbs it up. That will give me a clear indication if I should continue this type of content or if you want something different. Obviously, you can send me a topic of your choice. I'm definitely open to any topic. Even if I've talked about it before, I'm willing to talk about it again. So stay tuned for more content. It's OPEX. I'm trying to help you guys out as much as I can. I have a lot of philosophy, and I'm going to try to make these videos 100% under an hour from now on. I have more time in my schedule, so I'm going to definitely produce more content for you guys. So stay tuned for more content. Plenty more coming. It's OPEX. I'm out.